Good evening. I'll now call to order the City Council meeting of the City of Dana Point for Tuesday, October 2nd. Madam Clerk, will you please provide the roll call?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All the council are present with the exception of Councilmember Tomlinson at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. City Attorney, is there a need for a closed session?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We have one item this evening. It's a conference with the labor negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency designated representative is the city manager, and we will be addressing unrepresented and represented employees, all positions in the city. That concludes my report.
Thank you. With that, we will recess into closed session until 6 o'clock. Good evening. Welcome to the Dana Point City Council meeting of October 2nd, 2018. We will now reconvene our meeting, and we will begin tonight with our Pledge of Allegiance led by our Mayor Pro Tem, Miller.
Please face the flag and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please remain standing for the invocation. The invocation this evening will be provided by the Orange County Fire Authority Chaplain, Brett Peterson.
You know, our money talks, and what it says loud and clear is, in God we trust. And so it's appropriate that we invoke God to be with us at this meeting. Please bow. Most gracious Heavenly Father, with grateful hearts, we thank you for being able to serve this great city of Dana Point. In your holy and providential care, Lord God, we ask that you would bless this meeting, that you would grace Dana Point, the mayor, the city council, the fire authority, the sheriff's department, and all those that serve this great city, its businesses, its citizens, and the chamber as well. We pray that you would bless this city with continued success as they go forward with their mission to make Dana Point the best that it can be. I pray that you would give each council member wisdom here tonight. And Lord, I pray for all the families of all those that serve. I pray that you would protect them, that you would fill their homes with your love and your grace. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, tonight we have a presentation to give to the OCFA. It is OCFA Fire Prevention Week. So if I could, I would like to ask our Mayor Pro Tem, Joe Miller, who is the Vice Chair of OCFA, to join me down in the well as Battalion Chief Wiedensohler, if you would join me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have a proclamation to award tonight, too. So what I will do is read the proclamation. The proclamation for Fire Prevention Week, October 7th to the 13th, 2018. Whereas fire is a serious public safety concern, both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire. Whereas U.S. fire departments respond to an estimated average of 358,500 home fires per year, resulting in an annual average of 2,510 civilian fire deaths. And whereas newer homes are built with lightweight materials that burn faster than older home constructions, with many of today's products and furnishings producing toxic gases and smoke when burned, making it impossible to see and breathe within moments. And whereas these conditions contribute to a much smaller window of time for people to escape a home fire safely, with people having as little as 1 to 2 minutes to escape from the time the smoke alarm sounds. And whereas Orange County residents are responsive to public education and outreach measures and can take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes. And whereas 2018 Fire Prevention Week theme, look, listen, learn, Be aware, fire can happen anywhere, effectively serves to educate the public about 3 basic steps to reduce the likelihood of fire and how to safely escape in the event of one. And whereas, look for places a fire can start. Identify and address any potential fire hazards in the home. Listen for the sound of the smoke alarm and go to your outside meeting place a safe distance away from the home. Learn 2 ways out of every room and make sure all doors and windows leading outside open easily and are free of clutter. Taking steps to reduce the likelihood of fire and creating a home fire escape plan provide the skill set and know-how to quickly and safely escape a home fire situation. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Dana Point does hereby declare October 7th to the 13th, 2018 as Fire Prevention Week, and urges its residents to develop a home fire escape plan with all members of the household and practice it twice a year, and to participate in the many public safety activities and efforts of Orange County Fire Authority's Fire and Emergency Services during Fire Prevention Week 2018. Dated the 2nd day of October 2018, Richard Vixoric, Mayor. Congratulations. Would you like to say anything?
Sure. I'd just like to say thank you for this presentation, this award. Very important. I just wanted to open up to the community of Dana Point that there's 2 opportunities for you. October 6th at our headquarters off Jamboree and Tustin Ranch Road in the city of Irvine is our open house day. It's a huge undertaking for our department, our prevention program, community risk reduction. If you have kids, please bring them up. It's a great day for them. I believe it starts at 10 o'clock. You can go online to ocfa.org for that. The second opportunity will be right here in Dana Point on October 13th at Station 30 over off of Stonehill and Nagel. Feel free to come on by. The crews will be there that day to welcome you at Station 30 there from 9 to 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks for your service.
Bless you, Mr. Munoz.
Okay, next on the agenda is the reading of ordinance titles. At this time, the city clerk will read the title of the ordinances listed on the agenda. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two titles to read this evening. The first is item number 8, which is a second reading and adoption of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Dana Point, California, approving zone text amendment, ZTA 18-0001, to modify and add various provisions to the zoning code ordinance and submission as part of Local Coastal Program Amendment, LCPA 18-0001, for approval and certification by the California Coastal Commission. The second one is item number 11. It is an introduction and first reading of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Dana Point, California, amending Dana Point Municipal Code Title 11, Peace, Morals, and Safety, and Title 13, Parks and Recreation Facilities, to clarify and amend the city's regulations related to fires. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving to the consent calendar portion of the agenda. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine, and all will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the City Council, the public, or staff request specific items be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Madam Clerk, do we have any items to be removed by the public?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. City Manager, do we have any items to be removed by staff?
No, sir.
Council members, are there any items to be removed? Okay, seeing none, I will move the recommended actions for the consent calendar. Second. Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Well, moving on to the public comments portion of the agenda. There will be a 3-minute time limit per person and an overall time limit of 30 minutes for this public comments portion of the agenda. At the mayor's discretion, the balance of public comments will be heard after the new business portion of the agenda. All comments are to be directed to the city council and shall not consist of any personal attacks. Members of the public are expected to maintain a professional, courteous decorum during their comments. State law prohibits the city council from taking action on a specific item unless it appears on the posted agenda. The city clerk will distribute any handouts that you may have. And if you would, please state your name and city of residence for the record when you speak. Madam Clerk, I see we have one public comment tonight. Our speaker is Mr. Wayne Yost.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, staff, members of the community. I'm going to keep it real brief. For those of you who had an opportunity to attend the car show a week and a half ago, thanks for attending. It was great. Thank you for your support. For those who did not attend, you really missed a great show. We had close to 300 antique, classic, and hot rods on display. The quality of them was unbelievable. Even from the car enthusiasts that I met, they said it was unbelievable. We had huge crowds, well in excess of 10,000 people coming through there, many from out of town. So let's keep up with these types of events. They're great. Go Dana Point.
Thank you, Mr. Yost. Are there any other public comments, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
With that, I will close the public comments portion of the agenda. Moving on to council reports. I will go around the horn and start with Councilmember Tomlinson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have one meeting to report on September 25th. I attended the short-term rental subcommittee meeting. And that is it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Wyatt.
I have turned in my list of meetings to the city clerk. There's one meeting that I would like to just spend a minute sort of highlighting and summarizing. On September 24th, right? Yeah, September 24th, the city manager Denny and Kelly Renders and I attended the South County Service Planning Area meeting on homelessness. Contrary to a previous understanding, we learned that the city did not have to declare a homeless emergency to take advantage of the money. That was limited to direct expense like building a shelter or siting things. But we learned that the state had now proposed that other projects could be eligible to provide services through a service provider, and that if a number of cities would get together and put together with a service provider a proposal, it would strengthen the proposal back, which was a great opportunity. Anyway, it did not take Mr. Denny and Ms. Renders long to jump on that opportunity and realize that something could be done. So over the next week or so, they realized that we could get with our neighboring cities who are working with Mercy House and use Mercy House as our proposal and pull together a proposal on how we might more closely work together and get a grant application in to bring some of that money to here to help us on a regional basis deal with homelessness, and in doing so pull our neighbors together with us on a concerted plan to deal with that. The grant applications are due this coming Friday, so it wasn't like a long-term item, and it really took some a determination to get it done. And so I wanted to specifically call out and extend my appreciation to Kelly Renders, who decided to do the heavy lifting and make this happen. And I guess I would say she's determined that. We will get the cities together. We did. There's already been one meeting taking place among the cities. I think there's another one this week, as I understand it. I think our odds from what's being put together of getting some of that money that's going to the county are pretty high. Ultimately, it will be up to the county to decide, how to disperse the money to the various grant applications that come in. But by just sheer determination to do it and drive, the staff here has made it possible for us to be in the mix. And even more importantly, we've gotten the best response of working together and sort of that first level it takes for us to regionally address this problem. So I really wanted to extend my appreciation for that to Kelly.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Lewis?
Thank you. Well, continuing the accolades for Kelly Renders and staff, this morning I attended the business perspective on homelessness that was here with a panel, Deputy Ivan, who is our homeless liaison, Stephanie from Mercy House, Kelly Renders, Rachel Johnson, and the pastor from Costa Mesa. And it was very useful, very informative, very well done. Thank you very much. Well attended, I thought, by the businesses, and gave a lot of very practical, useful information on what to do, what plan to come up with when they come to their business in the morning and there are homeless people, how to deal with it, and how to reach people in the city for help, because we're here to help. So I thought it was a very, very good program, well done, and I'd love to see one for residents as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've turned in my list of meetings already. I know that's hard to believe, but I did it. And I'd also like, in honor of Fire Prevention Week, OCFA has a program where we will replace fire alarms for free if we identify a need. And I think we need to take a look at some of our higher density housing projects here in town, particularly down in Doheny Village. In the spirit of, you just heard tonight that with the newer building materials, you may only have a minute to minute and a half to get out of your house. Fire alarms only have a 10-year life span. I don't know how long those fire alarms have been down there. I'm sure it's longer than 10, and they may not have batteries in it. So, and I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, that the ones we put on don't have batteries. They have a fixed 10-year battery in them, and they chirp. So you have to replace them once they start chirping. You can't replace a battery, and you can't take the battery out of them. So I'd like to direct staff to get with OCFA, identify some of these places, and see if there's something we can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have nothing to report. I've turned in my list of meetings already. I will take this opportunity. I rarely do this, but I understand my 4-year-old son is watching this tonight. So I want to say hi, Reed. Hopefully you're watching. Okay, thank you. Moving on to new business. Item number 9. Well, actually, before, there are no public hearings and there is no unfinished business. So now moving on to new business, I'll call item number 9. Mr. City Manager, is there a staff report?
Yes, sir. Mr. Killebrew has a brief presentation for you tonight.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Before you tonight is the fiscal year 2018 fourth quarter financial report and proposed adjustments to the FY19 budget. We covered a lot of what's in the FY18 summary report that's attached to this, that is a receive and file action, if I can get the next slide. In the workshops leading up to amending the 19 budget, I just wanted to show you where we're at as of this moment. Our auditors have gone through the numbers. Any adjustments that they propose to us, we've put them into our system, and I'm not expecting any more changes, but until they give me the final audit letters, these are subject to change. That's why it says unaudited on here. Revenues performed better than budget. We knew that. We mentioned it in our final workshops leading up to amending this year's budget in June. We did not amend the revenue budget at that point, nor the expenditure budget. So we did come in 1.7 above the final budget for revenues. If you could go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm going to go back and forth here real quick. On revenues, as mentioned back in the workshops, property tax came in exceptionally well this past year, with particularly the Prop 8 reassessments from property tax appeals that occurred during the Great Recession. We did get a one-time land and district impact fee from the large development that's taking place down there. Hotel taxes, and I see Johnny Westham from our Visit Dana Point in the house tonight for the next item. Also performed well. It actually came in about 150,000 higher than the amendment we put together back in, I'll say, February of this year, but it finished June 30 up 389,000 above budget. In lieu property tax, as mentioned again in the workshops, follows the property tax, so we did see a comfortable gain there. And our building plan check fees did come in under what we had expected, but we're still trying to time when the eventual slowdown of this record pace of development that we've been seeing the last several years is going to occur, but we did take a little bit of a dip there. If I could go back to the prior slide now, Rachel. Expenditures came in $2 million under budget. We're going to ask you to spend some of those savings tonight when I get to a later slide. But bottom line, our ending fund balance came in 3.7 better than the budget. And if I could go ahead and go forward here on the expenditure side, some great things that we did this past year was we did increase our transfers to fund capital projects by 650,000, and we increased we actually transferred $2 million into the facilities fund, but it was 1.1 million more than the previous year, which is when we did the police services substation build. So we did increase funding for all capital projects. Police services, we did see the increase this past year. That was a little anomalous compared to the prior year because there was a credit in the prior year, but we did see the expected roughly 5% actual increase in our police costs. Contracts were down. We've been doing a bunch of projects in FY17 that slowed in 18, Doheny Village being one of them, but there was also a lot of contracted out services related to some of the bigger development projects that came through. And then personnel costs did come in $321,000 under budget this past year. We had a slew of vacancies, and the staff has been running ragged the last 7-8 months trying to backfill with vacancies. So we did see some savings on personnel costs. The second part of the report, so that was the FY18 recap, is what we're proposing tonight. There was an increase in our emergency and cash flow reserves per policy. So we've got an emergency reserve that's set at 20% of our base revenue budget. So for FY19, that increased, emergency reserve increased 90,000, and then the cash flow reserve is set at 10% of revenues, and it increased 45,000. We do have purchase orders, contracts that were in play at June 30th that we had to keep going, and so we had savings by not spending the entire contract last year. We're asking you to roll over $187,000 in purchase orders, and then the new spending totals up to $214,000. 160 of that is one time, and then the balance of 54,000 would be ongoing. And I've got the laundry list on here of the things we're asking for, and there's quite a bit of detail in the actual staff report for each one of those items. If you have any questions, we're here to answer them for you. So the first column here, the current budget, has a $22.8 million general fund ending fund balance. The proposed, with those budget adjustments that were recommended, ends with 22.4. So we're in good stead with fully funded reserves, and we're here to answer any questions. I do want to finish. There was the other funds we have: gas tax, road maintenance, CIP. We've got rollovers in those. There's no new money being asked for in there from the general fund, but we do have true ups where we've got new tax revenue numbers that were presented to us, and we're just updating the budgets for those other funds in this report. So with that, we're here to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will close the public comments. Bring it back to council. I'll move the recommended action.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I can open it up to discussion. Would anyone like to begin? Councilmember Thompson?
Yes, Mr. Killebrew, on page 3, major variances. And the city's taken a lot of heat over the last couple of years from our residents about budgeting and how accurate it is. Can you tell me of any of those line items, which one you could expect to have budgeted for in your budget cycle? I know tell me the difficulty of predicting any one of those line items there, and how it impacts the budget, and why we should take heed over that when you don't really know what those are going to be.
Well, I kind of focus a lot of our time when we're trying to do budget projections on the bigger numbers. So you look at our biggest number in the budget would be the hotel tax and how the hotels are going to do. I do spend quite a bit of time talking to the general managers of the hotels and monitoring their progress and paying attention to their major construction projects. But they've been seeing record gains the last several years, and so my conservative nature won't allow me to budget what I really think they're going to hit. So I try and hit a conservative number, and then what I believe would be the 85 to 90% range, and we're usually pleasantly surprised. So on TOT, predicting there is going to be difficult. Property tax is usually spot on. This past year, though, we saw the anomalous Proposition 8 resets from appeals that property owners made to the county to lower their assessments back during the recession. So seeing where that was going to hit, along with the impacts of federal tax law changes and the deductibility of home mortgage interest, was presented some difficult predictability, if you will, for property tax this year, and that also impacted our in lieu property tax. Sales tax is always difficult to predict. There's always a lot of audits that take place, not just for businesses in Dana Point, but misallocations from large entities that take several years for audits to take place. So on the revenue side, that's the majority of our revenues, really. And then even on the minority, the other 15% of our revenues, you're looking at trying to predict what development's going to do in town, what projects are going to get presented, and figuring out, trying to guess at that is there's a lot of it's mostly guesswork, and it's just kind of a feel where things been going, what's going on with interest rates, and just kind of monitoring a lot of different economic factors. So it's very difficult on the revenue side. On the expense side, our largest expense being the police services contract, very easy to predict. We know what our contract is. There are credit adjustments that come into play at the end of the year based on use of overtime and vacancies that are backfilled, but usually fairly predictable. But it's such a big number. If you're off, 1%, you're talking over $100,000. So it can still fluctuate there. Personnel costs are second biggest cost, very predictable. When you get into our non-personnel costs, utilities, we saw a pretty good uptick this past year, as everybody did, in electric bills. Water, we run into some situations when there's a drought, for instance, where we might have some fluctuations that aren't very predictable. And then on the contracted out work, we do have quite a bit of unpredictability that follows the development work and the timing on that. Us contracting out planning, building, and engineering services is next to impossible to predict, just as is development work, because we don't know when the submittals for plans are going to come in. So it's a chore to predict and do budgeting, but we certainly try and do our best. There's some things you feel good about, and other things like our hotel tax that you really don't want to get too aggressive on predicting what revenue might come in there, and setting expectations that the money's going to be there to spend when what can happen to the economy. We saw a 40% drop in our hotel business when the Great Recession hit. I don't ever expect to see that happen in my career again, knock on wood, but seeing your largest revenue go off 40% over an 18-month period is pretty dramatic. So a little reticent to get too aggressive there. So I think I over-answered your question, but it's not easy, but it's what we have to do.
You did over-answer my question, but congratulations to you and city staff and your staff for doing the best you can on budgeting and making sure the city runs well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Councilmember Lewis?
Yes, thank you. Okay, I have a couple questions if you don't mind. So now one of our big expenses that's, I guess it's known, but I don't think it's in our fiscal 18-year budget anywhere, or if it is, tell me, is our unfunded pension liability?
It is in our budget. It's in Department 99, and
It-
it's also in our long-term financial plan. And we got a presentation from our actuary back in, I want to say, May 1st, if I'm not mistaken, or early May, that does show what those numbers are.
Okay, so people understand, in what sense then is it unfunded?
This year's payment, you're challenging me here, though.
Oh, sorry.
'Cause I think it's $250,000 this year.
Yeah.
And by 2025, it's projected to go up a little over 600,000 a year.
Okay,
So in relation to payroll, for instance, the 250,000 is about 3 to 3.5% of our payroll. So it's increasing. We're in a lot better shape than a lot of agencies, but it's still
Yes.
It's still a scary number when you see something growing that fast.
so, okay, so I'm clear. There's about 5 million you said out there?
Oh, total. Okay, I was talking about our annual payments that we have.
Okay, that's
Sorry.
where I was confused. So I'm talking
Yes.
about the unfunded part
Yeah,
that we haven't yet
Yeah,
put anywhere in our budgets, right?
it's on our financial statements.
Okay,
And it is in our budget to fund it based on the funding schedule provided to us by our pension plan, which is CalPERS. So if you go back 5 years, we had no unfunded liability. But what's taken place, and it's a good thing, is CalPERS has adjusted their assumptions on how they project what the eventual payout's going to be and what their investments are going to earn.
right.
And with that reassessment, the changing of those assumptions, it established an unfunded liability on paper, and
Right.
they put a funding plan together that we now have in our budget and in our long-term plan projections.
So that's is that in our fiscal year 19 budget then?
Yes, it is in our 19 budget, and it's been in our budget starting back in, I believe, FY15.
Okay, so there's no pension liability, that 5 million that I keep hearing. That's not unfunded that we have to deal with at some point in the future. That's already in our budgets.
It's unfunded. There is an unfunded liability. We'll use 5 million as the number right now, but it changes with
Right.
each year's actuarial reports. It is unfunded. Our required payments are the ones that I mentioned, the 250,000 going up to over 600. There's nothing preventing us from putting money into an account to pay down that unfunded liability, though.
And if I may, the council, and we've identified this council direction in your staff report tonight, is the council has directed us to look at the larger number. The annual budget number that Mike is talking about is, think of it like the minimum payment that you make every
Exactly.
month. So that's the minimum payment that we're making, but the council has said to us, we need to develop a plan to address the whole number. And so the governor recently signed legislation that gives us another tool to look at. And so we will be looking at that plan as well as private plans and bringing back to the council in a budget workshop discussion about how to attack the larger number.
Okay, so in using your analogy, the minimum payment on your credit card, so you're making the minimum payment, but you're not paying down that balance. Is that what you were saying?
Essentially, yes.
Okay. And then, so this was interesting. Met with the subcommittee that was recently formed, the Capital Improvement Subcommittee. And one of the things we were going over was the routine maintenance and repairs, maintenance, things that my understanding is that hasn't been budgeted for in a number of years, but now that is budgeted for, starting in 19, is that correct?
Starting in 18, but carried over to 19 as well.
Okay, so it was in this budget,
Correct.
okay. And we were
But
looking at,
that's not everything. It's just a portion.
right, so we started with the Facilities Improvement Fund. That was what, Parks, City Hall, and the Scenic Drive Overlook, and the bridge. right? Is that?
There's also park restrooms, there's the Salt Creek Water Treatment Facility, there's a number of other things, but essentially just think of it, anything that's vertical
Right.
would be in that fund, and then anything that's horizontal would be streets, curbs, gutters are in the CIP fund.
Okay, so at this point, I think and it was divided into priorities, priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, meaning priority 1, we need to do this now. Priority 2, we should do it, and priority 3, we can put that off. And what we were looking at so far with the parks and those verticals, we were looking at about 5 million to catch up, which we won't obviously do in 1 year.
Correct.
But we will start doing that. Now, did that also include replacement, or was this just repair maintenance?
It does include some replacement, but it's mostly repair and maintenance.
Okay, so as things wear out, we also need to start reserving or setting aside money for replacement of things, right? Okay. And is that something we're doing in 19 in that budget, the replacement fund?
This council commissioned us to do a full study of all of our facilities and to implement a preventive maintenance system. We've received a draft of the study, which I believe you got to look at your subcommittee meeting. And it's on us to now work on prioritizing and then implementing that whole schedule. When we get through with the backlog, if you will, the idea would be that the base budget would have the maintenance and then maintenance money built into our operating budget and the eventual replacement built into the transfer to the facility fund.
Okay. And does that study include replacements and repair and maintenance?
It's soup to nuts, everything to manage what you have.
Okay. And then how about some kind of yearly program to start putting aside funds for new projects? So, we all keep talking about we want to do something with Doheny Village. There's no money for that right now, but that's one of our projects we want to do something. So is that something we have yet in budget, or is that something we need to do in the future?
We will be bringing forward council workshops following your work on the CIP subcommittee to specifically address the capital improvement inclusive of parks and facilities, and that will be the opportunity to identify those projects and then include them in the coming 2-year budget cycle.
Okay. And I just want to say thank you both, Mr. Killebrew and Mr. City Manager, for giving the subcommittee this information. It really was quite helpful, and moving forward, I think it'll be really good to have a good handle on, what we need to be setting aside money for and putting that in our budget so that we can start doing some planning for new projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wyatt?
Yes. So I've been through most of the numbers, but I want to just follow on to what Councilmember Lewis's comments were. So it looks like when I sort of netted out the adjustment, the 3.7 that we were above plan, and take the reserves out and the PO contract carryover and the list of requests that were about 3.1 or something out like that neighborhood above. And as we're pointing out now, we have now the decision to make going as to to what and when we want to decide what to do with that. And first of all, thank you for getting the fixed assets study coming together in parks. That we've nearly a year-long project that we've been working on, but it's a comprehensive plan. I'm looking forward to see if it sums up. So I think that we should ask the CIP subcommittee, as they're working for it now, to start to come back with their recommendation and priorities as they put together, future work that they envision, replacement work, and this maintenance stuff. Now, I'd like to see they would bring a recommendation back to council to say, okay, we've gone through this list of things, and here's what, here's our cut at the priorities and the various lines. If we cut off the monies at various points, what we would have above the line and below, so we have something to work with. I think that would be a huge benefit to the council. And then we pushed off the unfunded pension liability discussion tonight because of a change in state law that allows us another option. So we want to bring that back in to look at that. So I think we want to carefully now look at a series of uses and compare them to one another. The worry about our unfunded pension liabilities growing to nearly 8 or 9% from their current is 3 issues, pretty worrisome. So if we could do something to offset that growth and help that would be another impactful use in terms of just keeping us fiscally stable, because that gets that 650,000 or so. That's a big number for us to swallow every year for a while, and it peaks out probably somewhere about 2023, 2024, something like that. Yeah. So anyway, so I'd like to start to address that and keep it from really drawing down, and these years when we have revenue coming in well above expectation are the years when we have the opportunity to address some of that. So let's take advantage of that. That's my sort of feeling on the budget. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought we were going to have a more in-depth discussion about our unfunded pension liabilities, but I think there's a misconception out there about how these liabilities came about. We were 100% funded, and there's talk out there that the council made some decisions that created this unfunded pension liability. And I want people to understand that we don't have any input on how CalPERS makes their investments. And when they miss their projections, we have to make up that difference. And so we make our minimum payments every year because that's what we're required to do. We don't know how badly they're going to miss and how they're going to add on to our unfunded pension liabilities. That's how that number is growing. It's not because of something we're doing here with our staff. Now, one of the questions I do have is when they're unfunded, we are actually charged interest on those, correct?
Correct.
So one of the things we did at Fire Authority is we created our snowball plan. And what we're doing is we're paying down our unfunded pension liabilities quicker. And because we've been doing that, we've actually saved almost $17 million in interest. And I want to take a look at that. And I know you guys are looking at this as we move forward. But I think it's important for people to understand where these unfunded liabilities come from. It's not because we're not making our payments. We are making them. But because CalPERS changes their assumptions or misses their projections, that adds on to what we're actually liable for as a community. So,
and we have done that in the past. There was an unfunded pension liability back in 2004 that the city had, and even while the Great Recession hit and when we were coming out of it, we made an $800,000 payment to pay that off, and that saved us a little over 2% of payroll for the last 6 years now. So 12%, you're looking at close to $800,000 it saved us.
Right.
So yes, we want to look at this because they're charging us about 7%, and our portfolio is earning about 2.5%. So you got to pick what's the smarter investment.
Right. So their assumptions, they're going to return 7%. Seems like they're going to return it off of the unfunded pension liabilities that they're charging this community. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that to some people that are listening out there. Hopefully there's somebody listening to this out there. But the other thing I want to talk about are our future programs. This is something I brought up 2 years ago, and talk about the diffs that we're going to be collecting off of the town center project, and that since we've already made the infrastructure investment, we return these diffs because that's what the developer has to pay for the impact on our community. it's something we can take a look at doing a general fund swap with those diffs and creating another account for these capital improvement projects. I don't know if we should set it aside specifically for any one right now, but is that something we can take a look at moving forward into create a fund for our future projects that we're looking for?
Those are general fund monies.
Mhm.
And they're essentially developers are repaying the general fund for the town center investment in this case that had a private, essentially it benefited their property in
Right.
particular. It was, the council set it pretty close to the max we could charge for these types of impact fees. And it's general fund money. So if the council wants to set it aside into a special reserve of some kind, that's a discretionary action by the council.
Okay, so as we're talking about, we're having, I don't know if they want to call them unexpected, but unassigned funds coming in, and we have they're at pretty much an all-time high level. We're trying to decide what to do with those. We should also take a look at these impact fees and what we're going to do with that, because that's what that money was used for an investment in our infrastructure and in our community. And we need to take a look at, okay, after we start recovering those, is there another project? What's next? So I made that recommendation about 2 years ago, and it didn't get very far, so I'm making it again tonight. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kilber, I want to commend you for your work on this, along with Mr. Denny. The motion, the recommended actions that we receive and file the financial report for FY18, and I'm looking at page 2 of your report for 2018, which talks about the actual operating surplus for the general fund was $5.2 million. I go down a few lines. Even if you factor in the net transfers out of $4.1 million, we would still have a surplus. So I really want to commend you on your work for that. And I also, then turning to the second part of the recommended action, which talks about the amendments to the budget that we're going to make. I flip forward to page 5 for FY19, and again, I see that for FY19, we will have an operating surplus of $2.5 million, and even looking down to the net transfers out of $1.7 million, again, that would still leave us with a surplus. Flipping back to page 2, when we talk about the ending fund balance, actual ending fund balance on June 30th, 2018, $21.6 million of a budget of approximately $40 million, correct?
Correct.
Or more than 50% in reserves. And while all those funds are unrestricted, some are designated, correct?
That is correct.
And leaving aside the fact that it's all unrestricted, how much of the $21.6 million is undesignated?
Right at $8 million.
$8 million, okay. So having said that, I just, again, I want to commend you on your work, along with the leadership of Mr. Denny, to produce these budgets and these surpluses. I'll ask if there's any more discussion. Councilmember Thomason.
One more. If it's okay with this council, several months ago, we voted to reduce the annual fireworks display that we have in the city of Dana Point and cut back on our Easter egg hunt. I'd like to see us, bring the fireworks show back to where it has been. The last 2 years I've been out of town. I've been at Boy Scout camp on Catalina Island, and I got to watch the fireworks show from a distance. And we do have an impressive fireworks show. And this year it was kind of shorter, all in line with other cities. And you know what? I want us to be the marquee city, and I disappointed myself when I voted to cut that expense and reduce the quality of the level of service that we give to our residents and our visitors. So if this council finds it appropriate, I'd like to bring those services back up to the level that we've had them before. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion before we vote? Councilmember Lewis?
Yes, thank you. I have a question on page 5. There's 2 items there. Lynn Scott Lawn Greenspan Engineers and then Heatherington Engineering. That's for the form-based code? Doheny plan or no?
It's for the Doheny Village planning effort that the council gets briefed on every month, and I believe Mark's got a lot more detail on where we're at on that, but I believe some of it's on hold and other parts are moving forward, engaging the business community and others, so.
Yeah, these contracts are in place, and as we've identified before, our expectation is probably right after the first of the year, we're going to come back to you with a report on the work that the planning staff's been doing with the community on the update to the zoning code, be it a form-based or a traditional zoning code. That decision really hasn't been made, or a recommendation hasn't been made yet from that group on what area or which preference they have. And so that to the extent that the zoning changes that they are seeking will require some investigation, these will be resources that are available to do that investigation before making a recommendation to your council.
Okay, so this isn't money we've actually spent or we're committed to, but it's available.
That's correct.
Up to this month.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments before we vote?
Just
Councilmember Wise?
A couple brief. First of all, I would like to weigh in my agreement with Councilmember Miller that to make it understood that unfunded pension liability was not something the city created, and make sure that is well understood. What we have to do now is, however it got created, is to figure out how to deal with it. I think we're doing that. We had the actuarial in a few months ago to give us some ideas, and now there's another possibility. So this is a good time for us to look to address that now as we understand the options and what it means in terms of the alternatives that keep us from having that be so impactful on us in the future, and what approaches we might take. I think it's responsible and a useful thing to do. But yes, I want to make sure that there isn't a miscommunication, that the city didn't get there because we simply weren't doing what we should be doing. We got there because CalPERS had thought that they could earn 8% forever on money, and found out that wasn't going to happen. So we should look at all those opportunities. So just in terms of looking at our budget, I'd like to get some of the data we have coming back to us about projects and expenditures a little more before we start to add back in. But at some point, to follow on Mr. Tomlinson's request, we have a point in time when we have to commit to the fireworks. It's X months ahead of time, so we should make sure that prior to that time we address that budget question.
Thank you very much. Any other comments before we vote? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Well, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. Moving on to item number 10. Dana Point Tourism Business Improvement District Annual Report and Renewal for 2019. Mr. City Manager, is there a staff report?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's always a good day when Economic Development Manager Kelly Renders actually gets to talk about economic development, so she'll do that tonight with respect to our T-bid process.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight we're asking you to adopt an ordinance confirming the T-bid's annual report, which covers activities planned for the 2019 calendar year for Visit Dana Point. These activities include the continuation of its successful meetings, marketing programs, leisure marketing, video, digital, and social media promotions, and public relations initiatives. And we're also asking the council to set a public hearing date for November 20th for the formal renewal of the T-bid for the 2019 calendar year. This will be the 9th year for the T-bid should it be renewed. I'm available for questions, and Johnny Westham, the Executive Director of Visit Dana Point, is also here tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, bringing it back to council, I will move the recommended action.
Second that, Mr.
All
Mayor.
right, very well, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on this item? Mayor Pro Tem Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Renders, you know, we've had our T-bid for 9 years. We've now created the DMO. I'm glad Mr. Weston's here. And I'm probably about to throw him a little curveball because we didn't get to have our chance to have our meeting before this meeting. But is there any discussion about adding other members to the T-bid instead of just our 4 big resorts? Because I talked to a lot of our business owners out there, and they are concerned. They want to be a part of the DMO because they understand how important it is to our community. And I think we need at some point to start having the discussion about how do we open up that membership to allow them to participate, financially to support it at some point, and if nothing else, just to have input on how the money's being spent and what the goal of the DMO is.
Sure, I can ask Johnny to make a comment on that if he prefers, from any direction that his board has given him as far as outreach to other constituents in the community.
Yes, good evening. And Joe, I do apologize for
That's my fault
having
too.
to cancel our meeting, but I'm feeling better.
Okay, good.
So a little bit about my background. I spent about 13 years in other DMO spaces with 2 different bureaus, and they both have membership departments, and I headed up both those membership departments. So I do know the value of working with other entities outside the stakeholders to further the destination, but also their businesses and the overall economy. So from our perspective right now, I am working with the board on looking at additional opportunities to include additional properties into the T-bid, and that's something that we'd like to discuss moving forward and just kind of a brainstorm right now. As far as other businesses that aren't hotel specific, we are working with them on other alternative opportunities to engage. On October 24th through 27th, we'll actually be doing a destination photo and video shoot, and it's running us about $65,000. And what we're doing is we're actually taking a lot of those photo shoots and the video off property, off the hotels. So we're looking at, Dana Wharf and a variety of restaurants and those types of businesses to include them into the overall destination story. I think one of the most successful things that we could do as a DMO is tell that destination story and all those assets and those unique selling points that make Dana Point such a unique destination, right? If you take the holistic view of Dana Point and the genetic makeup of our DMO, it's exactly the same as any other DMO's genetic makeup anywhere in the state of California. What we can do differently is actually embrace those different organizations within the community to help grow their business, but also include their input into how we better position ourselves. And another scenario that we're doing right now is we're working with, and we retained an organization named MMGY Global, which is the largest tourism research and marketing agency in the world. And what they're doing right now is doing stakeholder surveys. And the stakeholders include non-hotel businesses, the hotels, community stakeholders, a group of residents that Mr. Denny had put together. They'll be doing resident surveys. They'll be doing visitor surveys who have been here and have expectations, and visitors who have not been here and who have perceptions of Dana Point. And together we're trying to find out what the root of the brand Dana Point is and the message behind, like I said, the unique and cool selling points behind Dana Point. And that's going to be the next revolution of what we're going to become as the DMO in the near future. So I do take your points very, very seriously. I do think it's very important for us to be working with the community, and as we develop, I think you'll see a much stronger unity between what we're doing and what the rest of the community is doing.
Thank you. I mean, it was important to me that you guys are going down that path because I agree with you 100%. The rest of the community needs to be involved in this. We have to have buy-in by all portions of our community. So thank you for all that work that you're doing.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Weston before he leaves the podium? Councilmember Wyatt?
I just wanted to, I got the opportunity to sit with him and go through the overall plans, and I want to thank him for taking the time to do that. And really, it's really helpful to see what their thinking is and where they're trying to go. And make sure we in the city are in sync. So thank you for
Absolutely.
taking the
Thank
time
you.
and putting that together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Weston? No?
All right,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments? Councilmember Thompson.
Yes, I just wanted to thank the major resorts. You know, if you look at 2010, when we're at 7.2 million from TOT, and looking at 2018 at 12.9 million, a lot of that's been due to the economy, but a lot of it's due to the investments that these resorts have made in Dana Point. When the economy looked down, they doubled down, and they invested in our community in Dana Point, and I want to thank them for what they've done. It really means a lot. You know, they could have put the money elsewhere, but they put it in Dana Point. They doubled down when things were looking bleak, and we're in this position today because they bet on Dana Point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments before we vote? Very well, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously. I know. All right, moving on to item number 11. Mr. City Manager, do we have a staff report?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and under the category of other duties as assigned, Ms. Renders is presenting this staff report tonight.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Switching gears to municipal codes. Tonight, we're requesting that the City Council introduce and hold the first reading of an ordinance which seeks to amend the Dana Point Municipal Code Title 11, Peace, Morals, and Safety, and Title 13, Parks and Recreation Facilities. As mentioned in prior City Council meetings, we've been planning to bring forward an amendment in regards to our sections on fire, and we are moving them out of parks and recreation facilities and into Chapter 11 so that they can be applied citywide. The language was developed in tandem with Orange County Fire Authority. It has gone through Orange County Fire Authority's attorney and our city attorney. So I'm available for questions, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll bring it back to council. I'll move the recommended action.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on this item? Mayor Pro Tem Miller.
I want to thank staff on this and OCFA as well. I mean, this couldn't be more timely considering one of the fires we just had on our slope that was because of unauthorized open flame in some vegetative areas. And as most people know, that slope has now been, I don't know the right term for it, but they removed the fuel source and we're replanting it today. I know that some of the residents down there are unhappy about that, but you know, rest assured those plants will grow back. But it's better to have those fuel source removed instead of a wall of flames coming up into your backyard and potentially threatening your residents. So thank you to staff for this. This is very timely. I appreciate this, and I'm going to vote yes, I guess. Support it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Councilmember Wyatt.
my comment too is it's just one of those holes that we had where you realize that it was uncovered, and when we discovered it, working with Fire Authority to make sure we had it right was a huge, I mean, it had to be done, and it was done well. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments before we vote? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to the next section of our agenda is staff reports. Mr. City Manager?
None tonight, sir.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney?
I don't have anything this evening.
Thank you very much. That
Mr.
brings-
Mayor?
Oh, yes,
Could I
Councilmember
just
Lewis.
make one quick comment? I inadvertently, when I talked about the homeless meeting this morning for the businesses, left out one of our very vital staff members, Matt Sinacori, was there. Yes, I'm sorry.
Don't forget Mr. Sinacori. Oh, my.
So I just wanted to give you credit because I think
He's
you're
at
awesome.
everything. We have made the assumption he was there.
Well, I want everyone to know. So, thank you.
On that note, I see Mr. Sinacori pass by my house last weekend, and I was up earlier than normal, just before sunrise, and there he goes in his truck with a smile on his face, working very hard. So, thank you, Mr. Sinacori.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. Thank you, Mr. Sinacori. And that brings us to our adjournment. The next regular meeting of the City Council will be October 16th, 2018 at 5 p.m. in the City Council Chamber. With that, we are adjourned.